Most people think the scariest moments happen in the dark, but that's not true. Sometimes the real fear begins when the lights are on, the room is quiet, and you're convinced you're completely alone. That's when your mind should be at peace, when nothing strange is supposed to happen. But that's exactly when it started for me. A soft whisper, a breath, my own name spoken by a voice I didn't recognize. And this is not a dream or a story someone told me. This is real as the room you're sitting in right now. The first time it happened, I remember I was on my phone late at night, scrolling like always. The house was quiet, my family asleep, and the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. Everything felt normal, boring even. Then out of nowhere, I heard it. My name. Not shouted, not even spoken clearly, just a gentle whisper, like someone leaning close to my ear. I froze. I didn't move at all. For a few seconds, I tried convincing myself it was just my imagination or maybe a sound from outside. But here's the part that still chills me. My window was closed, and the whisper came from behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My whole body felt heavy, like something was stopping me. I forced myself to stand up, pretending I wasn't scared, and walked out of my room without looking back. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake on the couch until morning, telling myself I'd imagined everything. And honestly, I believed that until it happened again. Over the next few days, small things kept bothering me. At first, it was tiny sounds, like someone lightly tapping the wall or brushing their fingers across the floor. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, but just enough to make me pause and listen. I tried to ignore it, but the strange feeling in my chest kept growing, like something was watching me in plain sight. Then one evening, while I was alone in the living room, I heard my name again. This time it was clearer, closer, and it sounded like someone trying not to be heard, almost playful. I told myself it was just stress, lack of sleep, or maybe the house settling. You know how everyone tries to rationalize weird moments? That's what I did too. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something was different. I didn't tell anyone because I knew what they'd say. They'd laugh it off, or they'd say I was tired or imagining things. And honestly, I didn't want anyone to think I was losing it. So I stayed quiet and tried to forget. But whatever this was, it didn't want me to forget. It wanted my attention. Soon, the whispering wasn't just happening at night. I started hearing it during the day, too, usually when I was alone in a room. The strange part was that it always said my name, nothing else. There was no threat, no sentence, no message. Just my name, spoken softly, like someone was calling out to me from a few inches away. Sometimes it sounded like a man, sometimes like a woman. But every time, it felt like the voice knew exactly who I was. And somehow, it always spoke at the perfect moment, right when my guard was down, right when the room got quiet, right when my mind drifted away. Almost like it could sense what I was thinking. Days turned into weeks, and the whispering slowly became a part of my life. I started expecting it. I started listening for it. And that's when the fear turned into something else, curiosity. I kept trying to figure out where it came from. I'd check every corner of the room, behind the doors, inside the closets. I even tried recording audio at night, but every time I played back the recordings, there was nothing. Not a single sound. It was like the voice didn't want to be caught. One night, I was sitting at my desk working on something. I remember it so clearly because everything felt unusually calm. No tapping, no soft movements, no presence behind me. I almost started thinking the whole thing was finally over. But then, I felt a cold breeze across the back of my neck, even though all the windows were closed. I didn't even have time to react before I heard it again, this time directly beside my ear. My name, whispered so quietly, but so close, that I could feel the warmth of the breath. My whole body tightened. I couldn't look. I couldn't breathe. For the first time, I felt like whatever this was, it wasn't just whispering. It was standing right behind me. I ran out of the room and didn't come back until the next morning, when sunlight made everything look harmless again. But something strange happened that night. When I woke up, I found my bedroom door slightly open, even though I had closed it completely before running out. And right on the floor, just inches from the doorway, was something that made my chest tighten. a small piece of paper, a torn scrap like from an old notebook, and on it, written in very light pencil, was my name. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just whispering to me. It wanted me to know it was real. After that day, everything changed. The whispering grew more frequent, more confident. Sometimes the voice sounded like someone I knew, copying their tone, their softness. Other times, it sounded like someone I had never heard before, soft, distant, curious. But no matter how it sounded, one thing stayed the same. It always came when I was alone. I started noticing other small signs too. Objects slightly moved from where I left them. A chair pulled back from the table. A book lying open even though I knew I hadn't touched it. Lights flickering for a second before returning to normal. Nothing harmful, nothing dramatic. Just small reminders that something was there, waiting. And the strangest part? It never whispered anyone else's name. Only mine. As if I was the only person it wanted. The more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. The whispering grew clearer, closer, almost conversational, though it still only spoke my name. And every time I heard it, I felt the same mix of fear and curiosity. Why me? What did it want? How long had it been here? I thought I was starting to understand its pattern. Until something happened that broke every rule it had followed. Something that made me question everything I thought I knew. Because last night, for the first time ever, it didn't whisper my name. It whispered something else. Something I'm still not ready to say out loud. And when I turned around, slowly, terrified, knowing I shouldn't, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. What I saw, or what I think I saw, changed everything. And if what I felt was real, then the whisper wasn't the beginning. It was a warning. And now I think the real story is just about to start. When I turned around that night, I expected to see nothing. Maybe an empty corner. Maybe the shadow of a chair. Maybe just a quiet darkness playing tricks on my tired mind. But I didn't see any of that. Instead, I saw something so subtle that it almost didn't feel real. It was a shape, faint, like a blur in the air. Standing just far enough that I couldn't make out details, but close enough that I felt its presence. And the worst part was that it didn't move. It just stood there, as if waiting for me to notice it. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, even stepped back, but the shape didn't change. It didn't fade away. It didn't shift. It was like a shadow that didn't belong to anything around it. And as soon as my heart started racing, the faint shape slowly thinned out, dissolving into the darkness until the room was empty again. No whisper, no sound, just silence, so deep that it felt heavy. I didn't sleep that night either. I kept trying to make sense of what I saw. Maybe it was stress. Maybe the dim light from my hallway fell at a weird angle. Maybe my tired brain formed something out of nothing. I kept repeating those excuses to myself, but the truth didn't feel that simple anymore. Especially not after what the whisper said before I turned around. Because it didn't say my name this time. It whispered a word that made my stomach twist. A word that felt familiar yet out of place. A word that wasn't meant for me, but still felt connected somehow. I repeated that word in my head all night, over and over, trying to understand why it whispered it. Why now? And why so clearly? The next morning, I tried living normally, pretending nothing happened. But the moment I stepped into my room, I felt something different, like the air was slightly heavier, or the space carried a memory I didn't want to revisit. I looked around for that small piece of paper from the previous night, but it was gone. I searched under the bed, behind the door, even inside my drawers, but it had disappeared completely. That made me uneasy, because I didn't throw it away, and I definitely didn't touch it. Later that day, I decided I needed some answers, not from people, but from my own memory. I've lived in this house for years, and nothing strange had ever happened before. No weird sounds, no shadows, no signs of anything unusual. Everything started only weeks ago. So I tried tracing back to the exact moment things felt wrong. It all seemed to point to one day, a small, forgettable moment, when I came across an old wooden box in our storage room. The box wasn't ours originally. It came with the house when we moved in. My parents always said it belonged to the previous owners, and they didn't want to throw it away just in case it was important. Honestly, I'd always ignored it. But a few weeks ago, I opened it for the first time. Inside wasn't anything dramatic. Just a few old papers, a faded photograph, and a simple key with rust on the edges. Nothing scary or strange. But looking back now, that's the first evening I heard a noise in my room, a soft tapping sound that I brushed off. That's the first night I felt like someone was standing just behind me when I turned off the lights. And now I couldn't stop wondering, did opening that box trigger all of this? I went back to the storage room to check it again. The box was still there, right where I left it on the dusty shelf. But when I opened it this time, something felt different. The photograph that had been lying flat inside was now slightly tilted, and the key that was rusted earlier looked cleaner than before, as if someone had touched it. I held the photograph closer. It showed an old house, maybe from decades ago, with a family standing outside. A man, a woman, and a child holding something small in their hands. Their faces were faded, blurred by time, but the shape of the child stood out to me. Not because I recognized them, but because their posture, their expression, felt strangely familiar. The back of the photograph had a single sentence written lightly in pencil. The writing was shaky, uneven, as if the person's hands were trembling when they wrote it. It said, "He still calls." A chill ran down my spine. I looked around the storage room, suddenly aware of every small sound, every flicker of light. I didn't know who he was supposed to be. I didn't know who wrote the message. But something deep inside me felt like it was connected to the whisper that kept calling my name. I put the photo back, closed the box, and stepped out quickly. I didn't want to spend another second in that room. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to everything around me. The whisper didn't stop. It actually grew more frequent. But strangely, it didn't always sound the same anymore. Sometimes it sounded soft and curious, almost gentle. Other times, it felt distant, like an echo fading through a long hallway. And once or twice, it sounded hesitant, like whoever or whatever it was didn't know if it should speak. One afternoon, while I was alone in the living room, I heard a new sound. Not a whisper, not tapping, something else. Something like the rustling of fabric. It came from the hallway. I walked toward it slowly, trying to stay calm, telling myself it was probably just a curtain or a piece of clothing moving with the air. But when I reached the hallway, everything was still. Not a single thing was out of place. I stood there for a few seconds, listening carefully. That's when I heard my name again, but this time, it didn't come from behind me. It came from the far end of the hallway, near the storage room. The voice sounded smaller, almost like a child's whisper. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at the closed door of the storage room, waiting to hear it again. But the hallway stayed silent. That night, I sat on my bed, trying to put everything together. The whisper, the shape, the old box, the photo, the word it whispered that wasn't my name. It all felt connected, but I couldn't see how yet. All I knew was that something wanted my attention. Something had been trying to reach me long before I realized it. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get more confusing, something new happened. As I got up to close my bedroom door, I noticed a small smudge on the floor, right near the frame. A faint mark, like someone had dragged their fingertip across the dust. I crouched down to look closer, and my heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a random mark. It was a letter, lightly drawn. The same letter that started the word the whisper said last night. And that was the moment I realized something unsettling. Whatever whispered my name, whatever stood behind me, whatever left that first piece of paper, it knew I heard the new word. And now it wanted me to follow it. But follow it where? And why did I feel like the next time it whispered, it wouldn't be calling from behind me anymore? The tension in the air grew thicker each day, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And deep down, somewhere I didn't want to admit, part of me felt like I was getting closer to the truth. Closer than I should be. Because the whisper wasn't fading. It was getting braver. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the letter on the floor. It felt like a message meant only for me. Something subtle but intentional. I didn't tell anyone about it, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew nobody would believe it. Who would? A whisper calling my name, a shadowy shape, old boxes, strange markings, it all sounded unreal when spoken out loud. So I kept it to myself, hoping things would calm down, even though a part of me already knew they wouldn't. The next morning, I woke up feeling heavy, almost like I hadn't slept at all. The air in my room felt colder than usual. I remember sitting on my bed, just listening, waiting. For what? I didn't even know. But for the first time in days, the whisper didn't come. The silence should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It felt too quiet, too intentional. Like it was watching me, waiting for my reaction. I tried distracting myself by focusing on everyday things, cleaning my room, checking my phone, even doing chores I normally avoid. But every little sound made me jump. Even the soft hum of the fan felt suspicious. When I stepped into the hallway, I found myself glancing toward the storage room without meaning to. Something about that room bothered me now. It wasn't just because of the box or the photograph. It was the way the air near it felt slightly different, like it held a memory the rest of the house didn't. Later that afternoon, while I was making tea, I heard faint footsteps from upstairs. Slow, careful steps. I wasn't alone at home, so I assumed someone else was moving around. But when I checked, the room upstairs was empty. Completely empty. I stood there in the doorway, staring at the quiet space, feeling that same cold sensation creeping up my arms. Someone or something had been walking there. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. For the next few days, things shifted from strange to unsettling. Not in loud or dramatic ways, but in small, precise details. The whisper didn't just stay behind me anymore. Sometimes it came from the side. Sometimes it came from the corner of a room. Sometimes I felt like it was circling me, just out of sight. And every time I heard it, my chest tightened in a way I can't explain. Like the voice wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to get closer. One evening, I was sitting quietly, trying to focus on a book. My eyes kept drifting to the hallway, even though nothing was there. Suddenly, the whisper came again. But this time, it didn't say my name. It said that same strange word again. The same one from that night. The one that made everything begin to feel connected. Hearing it again made something in me shift. Like a piece of a puzzle snapping into place, just not enough to understand the whole picture. The word felt tied to the box, to the photograph, to the child in the picture whose face was too faded to recognize. I couldn't stop thinking about that. Why would that child's name, or whatever that word was, be whispered in my house? The next day, something unusual happened. My cousin came to visit. He's the type who doesn't believe in anything strange. No ghosts, no spirits, nothing supernatural. He just laughs everything off. When he entered the house, he paused for a second and said the place felt heavy. I didn't react, but inside I felt something tighten. He had no idea what I'd been dealing with, yet he sensed something immediately. While we were talking, he looked toward the hallway a couple of times, frowning a little. I asked him what was wrong, and he said it felt like someone was lingering there. Not in a creepy way, just present. When he finally left, I realized something strange. During the whole time he was in the house, the whisper didn't come once. Not a single sound. As if it didn't want to be heard when someone else was around. That made things even worse. It was picking moments. Choosing when to appear. Not random. Not accidental. It was aware. That night, I decided to go back to the storage room again. I don't know why. I guess I wanted answers, even though it scared me. When I opened the door, the room smelled slightly different, like old paper mixed with something cold. The wooden box was still there. I sat down slowly, the floor creaking beneath me, and opened the lid. The photograph had changed. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing supernatural or impossible. But the small details were different. The child who had been holding something before now seemed to have their hand slightly lowered, as if the object was hanging differently. And the background looked a little darker, almost like the picture had been taken just moments before something happened. My hands trembled as I flipped the photo over, hoping the message on the back was the same. It wasn't. The original words were still there, he still calls, but below it, written even lighter, barely visible, was another line. A single name. The same word the whisper had said. I dropped the photograph and stepped back, my breath stuck in my chest. It wasn't just whispering random things. It wasn't trying to confuse me. It was pointing me toward something. Someone. And then, as I stood frozen, The sound came again. Not from behind, not from the hallway, but from right there in the storage room. A soft, slow whisper. Not calling me. Not saying anything I could understand. Just breathing. Like something standing inches away, waiting for me to respond. I stepped out of the room immediately, shutting the door behind me. The whisper didn't follow, but I could feel its presence pressing against the other side of the door. For the next few nights, I barely slept. The whisper came more often, sometimes before I fell asleep, sometimes when I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. A few times, I felt like someone was lightly touching the edge of my blanket or standing near the foot of my bed. Every time I opened my eyes, the room was empty, but the air felt disturbed, like someone had been there moments before. I tried researching the history of the house, but I didn't find anything unusual online. No stories about the previous owners, no strange events, nothing that would explain the box or the whisper. That made me even more restless. Because if something had happened here, why wasn't it recorded anywhere? One day, while I was sitting in the living room trying to gather my thoughts, I heard someone calling from upstairs. It wasn't a whisper this time. It sounded like my name spoken normally, like someone familiar calling me. My first instinct was to answer, but then I froze. There was no one else at home. I walked halfway up the stairs before stopping. The voice had come from inside my room. I waited, listening. For a moment, it stayed silent. Then, a soft knock came from inside the room. Just one. Gentle, but deliberate. Something wanted me to come inside. But I didn't. I walked back down quietly and stayed near the front door until evening. I kept expecting the whisper to return, but instead the house stayed unervingly still, like it was waiting for me to make the next move. And the more I tried to avoid it, the more I realized something important. This thing wasn't just haunting the house. It was connected to me, connected to the word it whispered, connected to the child in that old photograph. And whatever it wanted, it wasn't finished yet. If anything, it felt like everything so far was just leading up to something bigger, something I wasn't prepared to face. Because now every time I walked past a dark corner or a quiet room, I felt the same invisible presence watching me, waiting. For the next couple of days, the house felt different in a way I couldn't describe. It wasn't louder or colder or physically changed, nothing obvious like that. It was the atmosphere. The sense that every room, every hallway, every shadowed corner was paying attention to me. Almost like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Waiting for me to take the next step. The whisper didn't speak as often, but that somehow made everything worse. Silence from something that had been so persistent didn't feel like peace, it felt like preparation. I tried staying out of the storage room, avoiding the hallway, keeping the lights on even during the day. But no matter how many lights I switched on, the shadows still felt heavier than they should be. They stretched longer. They lingered quietly. And I began noticing something else. Every time I passed by a mirror or a window at night, I felt this urge to look away quickly. Not because I was scared of my own reflection, but because I was scared I'd see something behind it. One evening, while I was in the kitchen washing dishes, I heard a faint whisper from the living room. It wasn't calling me or saying the strange word again. It was mumbling, soft, unclear, like someone talking to themselves. I turned off the water and listened closely, the sound barely reaching me. It lasted only a few seconds, then stopped completely. I walked slowly toward the living room, my heartbeat heavy in my ears. When I peeked in, everything looked normal, untouched. But the air was thick, like someone had just been there. That night, I couldn't pretend anymore that this thing was just whispering randomly. It was communicating. It was trying to tell me something, or warn me about something. Maybe both. The photograph in the box kept bothering me the most. I couldn't forget the way the child's hand had shifted. It didn't seem possible, yet the change was clear. That small detail kept replaying in my mind, especially because the new writing on the back matched the word the whisper said. I didn't want to go back to the storage room again, but something inside me knew I had to. Not to provoke whatever was following me, but because I felt like the truth was buried in that room, or in the memory of someone who once lived here. For hours I avoided going near it. I tried distracting myself with anything, my phone, old messages, random videos, but nothing worked. My mind kept drifting back to that room. Eventually, I gave in. I walked toward the storage room slowly, feeling the temperature drop with each step. The door felt colder than the rest of the house when I touched it. I pushed it open and waited. Nothing happened. The room looked the same as always. Boxes stacked carelessly, old furniture covered in dust, and in the corner, the old wooden box. But there was something new. A faint trail of dust disturbed on the floor, like someone had walked around recently. The footprints weren't clear enough to show shape, but the pattern was obvious. Someone, or something, had been inside this room after me. I knelt down slowly and opened the box. The photograph was still there, but this time it wasn't lying flat. It was standing, leaning slightly against the inside wall of the box. The child in the photograph looked the same as before, except their head was tilted just a little more to the side, like they were listening. Or watching. A wave of cold washed over me, like someone exhaled on my neck. I turned immediately, but the room behind me was empty. Still, the air felt disturbed, like someone had just stepped back out of sight. I picked up the photograph and examined it again. The back had the same writing, but below the whispered name, there was a faint line added, almost like a scratch. A straight mark pointing downward. I didn't know what it meant, but it left a feeling in my chest that something was coming. Something I had no control over. That night, things escalated. I was lying in bed, half awake, staring at the ceiling. I felt tired, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept replaying the day in my mind, the disturbed dust, the changed photograph, the new scratch on the back. The whisper hadn't said a word since I left the storage room, which made me even more uneasy. That silence never meant peace. Around midnight, I felt the mattress dip slightly. Not a lot, just enough to feel like someone had sat at the edge of my bed. I froze. My whole body stiffened. I didn't want to open my eyes, but my instincts were screaming that I wasn't alone. There was no whisper this time. No sound. Just weight. A quiet, heavy presence. I held my breath and slowly opened my eyes. The room was dark, but the shape sitting at the edge of the bed was darker still. Not fully defined, not detailed, just the outline of something human-like, sitting still, facing away from me. I felt the air around me turn cold again, colder than it had ever been before. Like the temperature had dropped in an instant. Then it moved, slowly, like it knew I was awake. Its head turned, gradually, silently, toward me. I couldn't see its face, just the outline shifting in my direction. My heart felt like it was going to burst. The whisper finally came. But it wasn't soft this time. It was right beside my ear, so close that the breath brushed my skin. You saw it. I jumped up immediately, scrambling off the bed, knocking into my nightstand. The lamp fell, clattering loudly onto the floor. I flicked the lights on with shaking hands, but the shape on the bed was gone. The mattress still had a small dent in it, like someone had just been sitting there. My chest tightened as I tried catching my breath. Everything felt too real now, too close. The whispers weren't just calling me anymore. They were reacting to me, responding to what I did. It knew I saw the changes in the photograph. It knew I went into the storage room. It knew I noticed everything. And then came the worst realization of all. If it could sit on my bed, if it could move things, if it could appear as a shape. It wasn't just a voice anymore. It was becoming stronger. Over the next 2 days, the activity in the house grew more intense. Lights flickered more often. Objects moved slightly when I wasn't looking. The whisper came from different rooms, even ones I wasn't in. Sometimes I'd hear soft footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, nothing was there. The presence wasn't trying to hide anymore. It wasn't waiting. It was closing in. The more I thought about the child in the photograph, the more I felt like that figure, the shadow, the whisper, the presence, was connected to them. Maybe it wasn't the child itself. Maybe it was something tied to them, something they left behind. Every time I tried to sleep, I felt something standing in the room. I'd open my eyes to shadows shifting, or faint whispers from the corners. Not saying my name. Not speaking the strange word. Just breathing. Watching. The tension in the house was reaching its peak, like something was building toward a moment it had been waiting for. Something final. Something inevitable. And then, late one night, everything changed. The whisper didn't come from the hallway. It didn't come from behind me. It came from inside the storage room, loud enough to shake me. This time, it didn't whisper my name or the strange word. It said one sentence. A sentence that made every part of me freeze. Come see what I left for you. The door to the storage room creaked open on its own, and the temperature in the hallway dropped instantly, like something had stepped out and was waiting right at the edge of the dark. The echo of that distant knock still lingered in the air as the two of them stood frozen, not sure whether to breathe or run. The hallway felt tighter than before, as if the walls had shifted inward while they weren't looking. The old building creaked softly, too softly, almost like it was trying to mask a sound hidden underneath. And that's when they both heard it again, a slow scrape, like something being dragged across the floor on the level below. The tension rose instantly, the kind that makes your skin prickle, because you know you aren't supposed to be here, not at this hour, not after everything they had already seen. Just when they thought the danger might be coming from downstairs, the lights above them flickered again. Only this time, instead of dying out, they flashed brighter than usual, flooding the hallway in a harsh white glow. For a moment, they both covered their eyes, and when the lights settled back to normal, the far end of the hallway looked different. A door they had passed earlier, a door that had been open, was now shut, completely. And the way it was shut felt deliberate, like someone inside wanted to make sure no one else entered. He motioned for her to stay quiet, but she was already staring at the door, her breathing shallow, her voice a whisper. That door wasn't closed before, right? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The tension had stretched tight enough that even a tiny movement felt like it would snap something. Every instinct told them to turn around, to get out while they still could. But another instinct, stronger, sharper, pulled them toward that door, as if whatever was behind it was connected to the strange recordings they had found earlier, the ones that mentioned shadows moving in places where no one should be. As they took a slow step forward, something new entered the picture, something they hadn't sensed before. A faint vibration in the floorboards. A pulse, almost like footsteps but too rhythmic, too controlled. And then came the second twist, subtle at first, but powerful enough to change everything. The vibrations weren't approaching the door, they were coming from behind them. Both spun around instantly, expecting to see someone or something in the hallway. But it was empty. And yet, the vibration didn't stop. It grew stronger, rising through the soles of their shoes and up their legs, like a warning tremor before something breaks. Then they noticed something they had completely missed earlier. A thin line of light glowing faintly along the seam of a hidden panel in the wall. It wasn't there before. Or maybe it was, but something had triggered it now. The glow pulsed in sync with the vibrations, giving the impression that someone, or something, was trying to signal them from the other side. The stakes shot up instantly. If the closed door was one mystery, this hidden panel was another, and now both were connected in ways neither of them understood. Their nerves tightened as the glow brightened, flickering like a heartbeat trying to push through. And for the first time, they sensed that they weren't dealing with just one threat. There were layers to this place, secrets stacked on secrets, and whatever was moving inside the walls was part of something bigger, something that wasn't supposed to be found. The hallway suddenly felt alive, as if every sound mattered. And with one more pulse of that hidden glow, they realized the conflict wasn't closing in from one direction. It was surrounding them. And the real danger was only just beginning to show its face. The glow behind the wall grew brighter until it was almost humming. And for a moment, they both stood still, unsure whether touching it would save them or make everything worse. But with the vibrations shaking the floor harder now, they didn't have time to argue. He reached out first, pressing his hand against the warm surface. The hidden panel slid open with a soft click, revealing a narrow chamber inside, quiet, dim, and strangely untouched compared to the rest of the building. It looked like someone had been using it to monitor everything happening in the hallways. Screens, wires, old equipment, and a single chair turned away from them, facing a flickering monitor. The closer they stepped toward the chair, the heavier the air felt. She whispered his name, her voice trembling, but he kept walking. Something on the monitor caught his eye, a live feed of the hallway they had just been standing in. And on the screen, a figure was standing there. Not a shadow, not a blur. A real figure, tall and still, positioned exactly where they had been seconds earlier. But when they rushed back to check the hallway, it was empty. The tension snapped all at once. They realized this place had been tracking them long before they entered. Every step, every movement, every moment of fear. The whole building had been part of the conflict, watching them, responding to them. As they turned back into the small chamber, the chair finally shifted. A quiet, slow movement. Someone was there, after all. When the chair rotated, they braced themselves for something terrifying. But it wasn't a creature or anything supernatural. It was an older man, exhausted, almost relieved to see them. He explained in a shaky voice that he had been hiding here for days, trying to stop the strange disturbances from spreading. The building systems had been malfunctioning, lights, doors, vibrations, all triggered by something trapped deep beneath the structure. He had tried to warn people, but no one listened. He had been forced to watch from behind the walls, hoping someone else would notice what he couldn't handle alone. The main conflict snapped into place. Everything, the strange sounds, the locked doors, the hidden signals, was connected to a sealed room in the basement where an old security system had been failing for years. Together, they rushed downstairs, guided by the man's trembling directions. When they reached the final door, the vibrations were stronger than ever, shaking the ground in short bursts. They worked together, unlocking the rusted mechanism, and the door finally swung open. Inside, they found the source of the chaos, an overloaded generator system sparking wildly, sending unpredictable surges through the entire building. They shut it down just seconds before it could explode, the trembling floor finally going still. For a moment, everything went quiet. The main conflict was resolved. The danger was over. They let out shaky breaths, relieved that the nightmare was finally ending. But just as they stepped back into the hallway, the older man froze, staring at the staircase above them. His face went pale. He lifted a trembling hand and pointed. There, at the top of the stairs, stood the same tall figure they had seen on the monitor earlier, silent, motionless, watching them as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. And before any of them could move, the lights flickered once more. The figure stepped forward, and the hallway behind them slowly, quietly shut itself again. The hallway door clicked shut behind them with a slow, heavy finality, echoing through the stairwell like a warning they couldn't ignore. They stood frozen at the bottom of the steps, staring up at the tall figure that blocked their only exit. The air felt heavier than before, as if the whole building was holding its breath. The older man clutched the railing to steady himself, whispering that he had never seen the figure this close. The two of them exchanged a look, one filled with fear, but also a strange sense of clarity after surviving everything so far. The figure didn't move at first. It simply stood there, watching them with an unreadable stillness. But then, slowly, it tilted its head. That was enough to send a cold wave across their skin. She took a quiet step back, and he instinctively reached for her arm, guiding her behind him as though protecting her would give him the strength to stand his ground. The older man whispered something they could barely hear, but it sounded like, "It's not here to hurt you, it's here to warn you." The figure took one single step down the stairs. The light above it flickered once, and in that flicker, the figure wasn't standing. It was suddenly halfway down the stairwell, closer than it had any right to be. They stumbled back, pressing themselves against the wall. But the older man didn't move. He stood there as if rooted to the floor, staring at the figure with a strange mix of fear and familiarity. Then something unexpected happened. The lights steadied. The vibrations in the floors stopped completely. A calm settled over the whole building, almost like the moment after a storm has burned itself out. The figure paused, holding still, and for a few seconds no one spoke, no one breathed. The older man finally stepped forward, raising both hands slowly, as if communicating without words. He told them, in a gentle voice, that the figure had never been the danger. It had been reacting to the danger, responding to the instability in the building, trying to get anyone, to notice what was happening. All those whispers, movements, shadows in the corner, they were warnings, not threats. The explanation settled over them like a soft weight. She whispered that it still didn't make sense why the figure looked the way it did, why it appeared only when they were alone. The older man explained that sometimes fear changes how people perceive things. Stress, darkness, and the unknown make the mind fill in gaps. Maybe the figure had been a normal person once, an old system warning, a projected emergency signal, distorted by failing equipment. Something created years ago to guide people out in case of danger, but stuck in a loop when the generator failed. A remnant of an outdated security system meant to help, not harm. Slowly, the figure lifted its arm and pointed toward the hallway door behind them, the same door that had closed earlier. A soft click followed, and the lock disengaged. It wasn't trapping them. It was showing them the way out. The older man's knees nearly buckled with relief. He wiped his face, looking 10 years younger in that moment. They took careful steps up the staircase, moving slowly so they wouldn't startle the figure, even though deep down they knew now that it wasn't here to attack them. As they reached the top, the figure stepped aside, giving them space. And as they passed it, neither of them felt the fear they expected. Instead, it felt more like the quiet presence of someone who had been trying to help the entire time, only misunderstood. When they reached the hallway, the door was wide open, letting in a faint cool breeze from outside. The building no longer felt like a trap. The air was clean, steady, peaceful. They stepped out into the courtyard, looking back only once to see if the figure followed, but it remained at the top of the stairs, a silent guardian watching from within the shadows. The older man finally let out a sigh he felt like he'd been holding for years. He thanked them for helping him shut down the failing generator, admitting that he had been too afraid to face the deeper parts of the building alone. He told them he could finally leave, finally rest, knowing the place wasn't dangerous anymore. They stood with him for a moment, listening to the gentle wind and feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle into something more manageable, like a memory instead of a threat. As they walked toward the exit gate, she turned to him and asked quietly if he thought the figure would ever disappear now that its purpose was fulfilled. He wasn't sure. He said some things linger because they're meant to watch over us, not to scare us. Some reminders stay behind to make sure we learn from what we survived. It wasn't an answer, but it was enough. When they reached the street, the world felt normal again. Cars passing, a dog barking in the distance, warm lights glowing from nearby houses. The contrast between that calm and what they had just escaped made them understand how close they'd come to losing something important. Not their lives, but their trust in themselves. The experience had shown them how fear can twist the truth, how shadows can hide warnings instead of threats, and how sometimes the things whispering your name in the dark aren't trying to pull you deeper into danger. They're trying to pull you out. That night, back home, they couldn't sleep right away. Every small sound made them glance toward the doorway. Old habits from the building still lingering. But instead of panic, there was clarity. And eventually, when sleep came, it wasn't filled with fear. Just the distant memory of a figure standing quietly, pointing them towards safety. Days later, they returned to check on the place out of curiosity. The older man had promised to meet them there. But when they arrived, the building was locked up, empty, and the lights were off. They found a small note taped to the gate, written in shaky handwriting, thanking them for helping him finish what he started, and assuring them everything was peaceful now. They looked at each other, realizing they might never fully understand everything they encountered. And maybe they didn't need to. As they walked away, she paused and looked back one last time. For a moment, in the highest window, she thought she saw a silhouette, a familiar stillness, watching quietly. But when she blinked, it was gone. Whether it was a reflection, her imagination, or something else, she couldn't say. She only knew she didn't feel scared anymore. She whispered his name softly as they kept walking, just to feel the comfort of his presence. And somewhere behind them, in the dark silence of the old building, It felt like something peaceful finally settling into rest. And that was the end of a story they would carry with them. One that began with fear, whispered warnings, and unanswered questions, but ended with understanding, closure, and the simple truth that not every shadow is meant to harm you. Some just want to guide you home,